Let's look at how transactions are entered into QuickBooks and how it is different from accounting on paper. One of the first things I recommend you do is open the home page. Our textbook does not tell you how to open this useful window, so you should write down these steps in your notes. To open the home page, click on Company and then Home Page. The home page gives you a graphical representation of the workflow for this particular company. Depending on the company, this workflow diagram could change. Notice we have a section for vendor-related transactions, customer-related transactions, they appear in this rectangle, banking-related transactions, they appear in this triangle, and then things related to the company, such as the chart of accounts. Let's open a trial balance to see all of the company's accounts. Opening a report is as simple as finding the report on the list, clicking on it to open it, and changing the date of the report. I'm going to change the date to January 31st, 2015. To get the report to accept the new data, I can either hit Tab on the keyboard or click Refresh to refresh the data using the new date, which is January 31st. Now, according to the report, the company has $45,000 of cash, $12,000 of furniture, $7,000 of notes payable, which is a liability, and $50,000 of capital. And as always, debits equal credits. Beginning accounting students are used to entering transactions into the journal. Later we will find out that there are usually faster ways to enter transactions into QuickBooks, but let's do it the slower way, which means using the journal. To open the journal, we need to click on Company and then Make General Journal Entries. Remember, the journal is also called the General Journal. Let's say I bought $50 of supplies with a check on January 31st, and now I am ready to enter the transaction into QuickBooks. To do so using this General Journal window, I need to know that my office supplies are going to go up. And since I've taken an accounting course, I know it goes up with a debit. So in the account box, I choose office supplies, and then I enter $50 into the debit since the account is going up. And since I paid for the office supplies with a check, I know the other account is the cash account. And cash is going down with a credit. Notice debits equal credits. In the memo, we need to enter the check number and the place we bought it from by typing purchased from Office Depot. Now there are three ways to save this transaction. If I want to close this window after saving it, I press Save and Close. If I want to save the transaction but leave the window open and enter a new transaction into a blank version of this window, I press Save and New, new being a new transaction. If I want to save the transaction, leave the window open, and leave the transaction displayed, I press Save. I want to save and leave the transaction displayed, so I will press Save eventually. But before I save, I want to display the trial balance at the same time. To view the trial balance report, I could simply click here to bring it to the front, but it's often buried behind these other windows. So I want to see a list of the windows I have open. To do so, I click on View Open Windows List. The textbook does not tell you about this handy feature, so I recommend you write down those steps in your notes. Here is the open windows list. It shows the windows I have open. As you can see, I have 3 windows open: make general journal entries, trial balance, and then the home page. Now I can simply click on the name of the window that I want to see, and QuickBooks brings it to the front. So I will click on trial balance, and notice it brings it to the front. Because the transaction date, oops, I forgot to change the transaction date. Let me change it to January 31st. Because the transaction date, January 31st, is included in the dates of the report, January 31st, the transaction should affect this report. When I click Save back here, the report will now include the result of the transaction. So I'm going to click Save. I'm going to bring the trial balance window back up to the front. As you can see, I now have $50 of office supplies and $50 less cash. So what QuickBooks has done is, as soon as I save the transaction in this window, with any of these 3 buttons, Save, Save and Close, or Save and New, QuickBooks has automatically posted the transaction to the ledger, and then the ledger balances show up here on the trial balance, or any other report that I might have open, as long as the report's dates include the date of the transaction I just entered. Now, QuickBooks was designed for non-accountants to use. Non-accountants don't know what debits are. They don't know what credits are. They don't know if assets increase with a debit or a credit, and they also probably don't know what an asset is versus a liability. So this Make General Journal Entries window will not often be used in QuickBooks because non-accountants don't understand it, and because other specialized windows based on something called special journals are much faster and more efficient. So I'm going to close this window. I don't have to click any of the Save buttons because I already clicked a Save button earlier. So now I'm going to show you the most efficient window to use when writing a check. I'm going to go back to the home page, and notice down here in the banking section there is an icon called Write Checks. If I point to the icon, it even tells me what the icon is for. It says Write Checks for an expense that have not yet been entered as a bill in QuickBooks, or to record a cash transaction. Get used to reading these helpful tips, as they are very useful for you on tests. Of course, if you aren't using this home page, you won't have these handy tips. So don't forget, the home page can be viewed by clicking on Company, Home Page. So I'm going to click the Write Checks icon, and it opens a window called Write Checks. If I maximize the window, the title of the window now appears up here. Notice the window looks like a check. Most non-accountants can use this window because they are used to writing checks on paper, but they would not have been able to use the General Journal window, which requires knowing debits and credits. So let's use this window to create another transaction. Let's say I'm entering a transaction in which a check was made out to Grayson Graphics. So in the Pay to the Order Of box, I choose Grayson Graphics. Let's say it's check number 2. Right now we can't manually enter the check number because QuickBooks is assuming we want to print the check on pre-printed checks. To override this and let us manually enter a check number, we just simply uncheck Print Later. Now if you cannot see this up here, that might be because this section was hidden. So to view that section, you hit the down arrow to show the ribbon, and then we can uncheck Print Later. Now we can enter check number 2. Let's say the check was written on January 31st, so the date is correct. We don't have to change it. And this time the amount was for $25. And the thing we purchased was design supplies. So we go down here into the account box and choose design supplies. Now for the memo, we might want to enter what it is that we bought. And now we're done. Notice how easy this window was to read and understand compared to the general journal window. Since I'm done writing checks with this window, I will click on Save and Close. And when I do that, let's see what happens with the trial balance. So I'm going to view the trial balance at the same time. Notice down here in the trial balance we don't have any design supplies, and our cash is at $44,950. When I save the transaction, we should see design supplies appear here for $25, and cash should go down by $25. Save and close. And now notice we now have design supplies $25, and we have $25 less cash. So from now on, for routine transactions such as writing checks, entering bills, paying bills, etc., we will use these specialized windows by clicking on these icons. Now if this home window is closed, you can still get to these windows by using the menu items up here. For example, if I want to enter a bill, notice the Enter Bills is in the Vendor section. If I want to enter bills, instead of clicking on Enter Bills here, if my home page is closed, I can go up to the Vendor section, and look, we have Enter Bills here. Remember, vendors are businesses from which we purchase things. So I'm going to click on Enter Bills. You notice the window is called Enter Bills, and it looks like a bill. I'm going to close that. I'm going to click on Enter Bills here, and notice the same window opens. So there are multiple ways to open the same window. Use whichever method you prefer, either the home page or these menus, which is what the authors teach you to use. I like using the home page because if I point to the icon, it reminds me what the window is for. For example, students often forget what the Create Sales Receipt window is for. Well, if you just point to this, it tells you it's to bill your customer and receive the payment at the same time. The textbook always has you close the home page and use the menu items, but most students prefer the visual look of the home page. So if you're like me and other students and like to use the home page, you can always open it with Company Home Page. Now what's really going on here with these windows, the windows being write checks, pay bills, enter bills, etc., is they are special journals. In our Intro to Accounting 2 class, we learn more about these special journals. All a special journal is a journal, or in the case of QuickBooks, it's a window, that is designed specifically for recording a certain transaction, such as writing a check. So it is quick and efficient, and a non-accountant can use it. So from now on, we're going to use special journal windows such as write checks, enter bills, pay bills, create invoices, receive payments, and create sales receipts. We will only use the Make General Journals Entries window for non-routine transactions such as adjusting entries and closing entries, all of which are done at the end of the accounting period. Now, when using these special journal windows, such as write checks, if you want to see your previous transaction, you can click on the left arrow. Notice it's also called the previous button. And here we go. Here's our Grayson Graphics check number 2 that we wrote on January 31st for $25 for those 3 drawing pads. Now, if we need to make a correction, we can simply make the change and then save the transaction by clicking on either Save and Close, Save and New, or Save. So let me make a correction here. Let's say we bought 4 drawing pads instead of 3. And I'm going to click on Save. And then this little window pops open. It says you've changed a transaction. Do you want to record your changes? So this is warning you that you have made a change. And in our case, yes, we do want to record the changes. Some of you may be wondering, what happened to the journal? You're probably used to seeing all transactions being in a journal format. Well, any transaction we enter into these special journal windows, such as write checks, gets recorded in the journal behind the scenes as debits and credits. So debits and credits are always still being used, but most of the time QuickBooks will enter them for you as long as you're using these special journal windows. So if you record a transaction in the write checks window, like we did here, after recording it, you can always open the journal report to see what debits and credits were recorded by QuickBooks. To open the journal report, you simply go to Reports, and then Accountant and Taxes, and then Journal. Remember, the transactions we entered were on January 31st. In the journal report, I only want to see transactions entered on January 31st. So I'm going to change both the dates to January 31 only. So this will only display January 31st transactions. I can either hit Tab on my keyboard to refresh the data, or I can click on Refresh here. Once the data is refreshed, it's showing we have 3 transactions with the date of January 31st. One was entered by the authors. That was the furniture, cash, and notes payable. And then here are the 2 transactions that we entered. One for office supplies and one for design supplies. So if you were ever curious what the debits and credits were for a transaction that you entered into a special journal window, such as write checks, you can open a journal report to see the resulting debits and credits to see if it makes sense to you. For example, when we bought the office supplies, it debited office supplies and it lowered cash with a credit. Notice that usually QuickBooks lists the debits first and then the credits, like in these 2. But every once in a while it will list the credit first. Don't worry about that, it's just a formatting issue with QuickBooks. Now if I wanted to correct one of these transactions, I could always just double click on it when I see this magnifying glass, and then it takes us back to the window in which the transaction was entered, and now I can change anything on here that I want. Save and close. Yes, we do want to save the transaction.